This is one of what I would say is only a handful of the most unique and interesting espresso machines on the market right now. It probably won't stay that way for very long, and we will always have regular Italian-esque espresso machines around, but the WPM Primus couldn't be further from that template of an espresso machine system. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly what this thing is, why it is interesting, and how it fits into the home espresso workflow without turning your kitchen into a science lab. At its core, the Primus is a tech-forward playground. Not overwhelming, not clinical, just a machine that's been built with a little bit more intention than most things at this price. And it sits in that sweet spot where, if you're a beginner, you won't get lost. But advanced home baristas will immediately start shaping profiles like it's a Tuesday hobby. And the idea around the Primus is simple. Fast, stable, reliable heat, quiet operation, and a variable pump pressure that allows users to either use the paddle to control the shot live, the screen to tap between pressure settings, or you can use a dozen or more saved pressure profiles that the machine will follow automatically. So now you get what I mean by interesting. And with a quick PSA, if you've already liked this video and subscribed to the channel, how about joining our Brew Club loyalty program? It's free to join, and every dollar you spend with us earns you points that you can then go ahead and redeem for extra discounts and exclusive deals. I'll throw a link in the description down below. All right, let's now get into the video. Taking a look over this monolith of a machine, I mean that in the most aesthetically pleasing way, looking unlike any Italian-made espresso machine ever, its dimensions are 23.5 centimeters wide, 49 centimeters deep, and 40 centimeters tall. Made completely out of stainless steel. Noting, this machine does not have a cup warmer or even a tray up top. Make what you want of that. And it does come with an external 1.8 litre water tank that I actually enjoy using. Now, it needs to be mentioned here early on regarding heating. This machine is unlike most other machines, and you're probably going to hear this a lot. Most machines pick a lane. Either it is a big, slow to heat up dual boiler with tons of stability, but a 20-minute heat up time. Or it is the fast heating up thermoblock that trades some of that back-to-back consistency and recovery time for the convenience of speedy heat up time. The Primus? It takes the best of both here and links them up to run a hybrid system that initially starts with a 0.8 litre stainless steel boiler, and this acts as a thermal feeder to the PID-controlled thermoblock that will then trim the temperature to the exact degree for brewing or steaming. And that's why this machine heats from cold within about 5 minutes, with none of the performance penalty you would expect from a small system. You also have full control over the brewing temperature within the settings. Equally, shot-to-shot temperature stability is surprisingly strong because the boiler is always feeding the thermoblock hot water, and recovery time between back-to-back shots is basically instant. And the temperature doesn't drift off its set point. It's not behaving like a small thermoblock system because technically it's a single boiler machine running dual thermoblock systems for brewing and steaming. Yet there are some espresso machines out there that just run dual thermoblock systems, and they call that a dual boiler. So you could almost get away with calling this a triple boiler. Now the steam wand, this being a cool touch wand, is activated by a single button. You have full control over the pressure from the steam settings. Just be aware the first time you go to use the steam wand, it can be that usual thermoblock slow to build up steam. Just give it a good purge, and once it's primed from the boiler, it's instant steam power at the press of a button. It's quite impressive. Then there's the hot water tap. Now, I drink long blacks. Call them Americanos if you wish, but one of my favorite additions to this machine is that hot water spout found directly under the group head. It's a bit of a gimmick maybe, but the simple workflow of offering that addition of hot water right before you brew, you don't have to move your cup around or anything. This water comes off the boiler at 90 degrees Celsius, and where most machines have piping hot water coming out at a crazy big tap, this is all you need. Below this is a stainless steel removable drip tray that includes a little red float to let you know when to change it. But it's fairly obvious anyway when you need to. The accessories you receive with the machine include a dual spouted WPM portafilter, 3 filter baskets with a single, standard double, and what I would call a cafe double basket. You also get a metal tamp and a metal blind filter basket, a cleaning cloth, a tamp mat, and a secondary steam wand tip with the choice of a 2 or 3 holes. I've already gone and added the 3-hole tip as it is the best option. So with all of that out of the way, I think it's time to jump in and actually make some coffee on this machine. What do you think? Yeah? All right, let's do it. Now, I haven't mentioned it yet, and I should preface before we make a shot that the second best part about this machine is it uses a gear pump, which does have a slightly different sound. It doesn't pulsate as much as other pumps, and whilst not quiet, it's not vibrating. So if you've ever had a cup rattle off of the drip tray during brewing, that's not going to happen with this machine, nor will you hear an unsettling rattle when brewing. Additionally, gear pumps are fantastic at speeding up and slowing down, so they can manage the variability in flow and pressure of the shot very reliably. That should be enough to lead us into the brewing of our first shot. So with my portafilter in hand, let's brew our first espresso shot. Now, there are 4 modes to brewing an espresso on the Primus, and you can use the screen itself in all cases to start and stop the shot, or you can use the paddle as well, moving it clockwise to begin and moving it back to stop. That's the basic motion of the paddle, on or off, unless you enter our first mode of brewing, which is a manual brewing mode. Now, this is by far the most hands-on approach to brewing espresso on the Primus, and it'll just get easier from here. So bear with me if this all sounds a little bit too much too soon. There are simpler ways to begin brewing coffee with this machine. This is, just from my perspective, the funnest way to brew coffee on the Primus. Beginning from the main screen, when we select the manual mode, we'll be essentially controlling the pressure the whole time with the paddle. You then select your maximum pressure during brewing, so this is the ceiling. And as it is a gear pump, it can manage the pressure build up and the ramp down to keep that pressure consistent. Anywhere from 1 bar to 12 bars of pressure. Just keep in mind, it's usually faster over that shorter amount of time in espresso brewing to increase the pressure than it is to decrease the pressure. And that's just something I've discovered with gear pump machines like this. And now you can either continue button pressing to enter into an automatic pre-infusion mode, or you can skip pre-infusion at any time by moving that paddle clockwise and starting the shot. From here, using the paddle to increase the pressure, you can keep an eye on the target bar pressure readout on the screen. This relating to your paddle position, along with the current bar pressure, which is usually chasing the target bar. Not to forget, I'd keep an eye on the brew time on the right-hand corner of the graph and your shot yield, which, for better or worse, I would still use a set of scales. As the gear pumps are great, the readout shows your volume in milliliters and your flow in milliliters a second for the water entering the group head, but that still gets a little skewed in a high pressure environment, not to mention headspace above the puck, water retention in the grinds, and this all accounts for about half the amount of water dispensed from the boiler that doesn't even reach the cup. So yield, measure it with a set of scales. Now, once you reach your target yield, then you can tap to save the pressure profile you just brewed to, and you'll give it a name, but you are unable to edit these manual profiles, or you can just exit. This is an absolute highlight of the machine. Paddle brewing is a lot of fun. There's a lot going on, but after adjusting your grind a few times and understanding how pressure builds, the pump reacts, and how flow can increase and decrease, you can really dial in shots that are pretty mind-blowing. One small but important thing to note is the Primus can pre-infuse at lower pressures, but don't expect it to crawl like some machines designed specifically for ultra slow flow profiling. It'll hit a minimum of around 3.5 mils a second unless you're grinding very fine. So yes, pre-infusion is controllable, but it's not going to move at a snail's pace. It's still very much in that high flow, pressure focused camp. Now we've just got 3 more modes to cover off. Next up, semi-automatic mode. Here, you get 4 key intervals in the shot's timeline where you can program pressure targets. And once set, you can start your shot with or without pre-infusion, and you'll tap the screen to progress through each pressure interval. It's a neat idea and less hands-on than manual mode, but for me, flow control is still limited. By the second or third target, I've often hit my yield before finishing the profile, so pressure ramps down slower than it builds, and hitting that exact ramp down target I find is a little tricky. You also can't cycle back through pressure settings, so it can feel a little locked in if your shot isn't cooperating. Still, you can always save and exit the profile easily, and that will probably be the key takeaway here. The next mode is auto mode. Best way to explain this one is it's pretty much like semi-automatic, although you program everything into the display prior to running the shot. So you still have pre-infusion and 4 intervals for selecting pressure over time. Then when you're ready, you just hit brew and it will follow the profile, or at least aim to follow that profile that you've programmed. And it is neat that you get to see the graph of the actual profile being overlaid versus the target pressure. Once again though, I would keep an eye on your yield so you don't overshoot the mark. If you don't get to the end of your profile as flow was way too fast, you may need to adjust either the grind or your profile to get the results that you're after. Yet another way to brew automatically, where it will follow a set profile, is going into your history or the profile library. Now the history is where you'll find your last 10 or so shots pulled on the machine. They're here in case you forgot to save it straight away. And the library, this has your saved profiles as well as preset WPM profiles stored. The WPM preset profiles are a helpful selection to brew automatically, following desirable and easy to dial in pressure curves. And you've got everything here from classic espresso to E61 and soup shots and plenty more. And this leaves us with the last mode. This is the constant pressure mode, and this is exactly what it sounds like, although you still get to program pre-infusion and max pressure. And once you begin brewing, it'll ramp straight up to that pressure set and stay there the entire shot. To begin brewing, you tap the single or the double cup button. Here, you'll want to reprogram the default settings for either of these single or double cup volumes, as by default, I've found them to be quite inadequate. Set them to basically as high as they can go if you're watching your shots yield and turning the shot off anyway, or this can be one of those areas where you can get fairly close to reproducible and consistent volume metrics. Now, it's not exact maths, but it gets pretty close. And that really depends on so many factors. Your grind, your beans, the brew ratio. I've got 20 grams in, I'm aiming for 40 grams out in 30 seconds. I've set my grind, I've basically dialed it in already, and I'm using an espresso roast, and it's gonna work for me. So play around with this setting and hopefully you find what works best for you. Now, with all 4 modes out of the way, the last approach to brewing, and probably the one that we would all like to mostly eventually lean into, is using the paddle for the instant brew. This is one where you just grind your beans out, set your portafilter up, lock your portafilter in, and without having to go into the main menu, you just open the paddle and it will begin brewing. Now by default, it's set to the constant pressure mode, but you can jump into the settings and change this to whichever mode you want to use the most. So no more needing to dive into the menu every time you want to brew. I find this a nice little time saver. Now all that's left to do is steam some milk. From the menu, you can program your steam pressure from 1 being the least to 7 being the most pressure. I found that sweet spot for me personally around 4 or 5. Then with the press of a button, steaming milk is very easy to do. Just make sure you do a good purge before you start steaming, and then give it a good purge after, as well as wiping that steam one down after each use. And when it comes to steaming, for back-to-back drinks, it's faster than most thermoblock only machines. Slower than a big dual boiler to build up, but perfectly manageable without waiting for back-to-back drinks. When it comes to cleaning the WPM Primus, it has an automatic back flushing cycle you enter in the settings. Add chemical into your blind filter, lock in the portafilter, and then start the cycle, and it will run through an on-off series to back flush that group head and clean the machine. There is also a cycle that applies to the steam wand if you find this necessary. Then descaling applies to the main boiler but not the thermoblocks. And because the tank is external, it's a little easier to stay on top of, so there's nothing here that's difficult. It's just part of regular ownership of an espresso machine. Now, a few things you should know. They're not deal breakers, just the kind of details you notice once you've lived with the machine for a bit. First, there's no real cup holder situation happening up top. It's not like you can't put things up here, it just doesn't feel like it was designed with that intention. It is easy to move past, but it is worth mentioning if you're someone who likes their cups riding shotgun up top. Then there's the height difference between the group head and your cup. Now, I know usually the complaint is the opposite, not enough clearance, but here it almost feels like we've gone a little too far the other way. The fix is simple: slip something underneath your cup and bring that gap down and you're good. It's just one of those small ergonomic quirks you clock on, say, day 3. Another thing worth calling out though is the portafilter compatibility. It is a hit and miss. Most third-party portafilters I tested simply don't lock properly in with the Primus. I did find one that worked in the studio, so it's not impossible, but the majority of the 7 or the 8 that I tried weren't a match. It's not a catastrophic issue if you're happy with the stock WPM portafilter, but if you're someone who likes running your favorite aftermarket handle or swapping baskets across different setups, this machine is noticeably less universal than others in its class. One more note that matters if you're into the more technical side of profiling. The variable gear pump gives you pressure control, absolutely, but it's not a flow profiling machine. The Primus generally runs on the higher flow end, so unless you're grinding very fine, the minimum flow into the group head I found is around 3 mils a second, regardless of what you tap on the screen. Slowing it down on the display is really just the coffee bed providing resistance and not the machine metering flow like something like the Lilith Bianca. That machine, it restricts flow but doesn't control pressure, and the Primus is the opposite. It's not a problem, just important to understand what this machine is and what it isn't. So that's the WPM Primus espresso machine for you. It doesn't just make espresso, it invites you into the process. It has its own logic, its own rhythm, and once you dial into it, you realize it's one of those rare pieces of gear that gives you more than you expect from what you paid for it. Fast heat, stable performance, real pressure control, and a workflow that lets you grow without overwhelming you. It's a promising little ecosystem for anyone who actually enjoys the craft of brewing espresso, not just what ends up in the cup. So if you've got any further questions you want me to go deeper on, something that I've touched on today, drop it in the comment section down below, and I'm always around and I'm happy to help. Thank you so much for watching to the end of this video, and I'll see you in the next one.